Hi, welcome to Board Gems. On this channel, I like to go over games that are usually a bit older, 10 years or more, and talk about whether they're still gems or not. But this also is a vlog of sorts, and I happen to have been playing some games recently that are more recent than what I usually cover. They happen to be two recent-ish, maybe the last 5 years or so, cooperative games. This is sort of the reintroduction of rough cuts, which is a type of video that I used to do where I would talk about a couple of games that had some similarity or some connecting theme about them. And then I would just talk about them, maybe compare them. But anyway, this is just chat, man. It's just chat. So this is going to be like a casual type of video. Unusual for me, I don't have any notes. This is all coming from up here. I haven't given it much thought prior to recording this. If it doesn't make any sense, I'm going to hope it makes sense by the time I finish editing. So I've been curious about these two cooperative board games for a while now. Different designers, but same publisher, same concept, in that they're cooperative games licensed from a horror franchise. They have some similarities also in that not only are they cooperative games, they're simple cooperative games. And in my experience, this is something that's tricky to pull off. I mean, a complex game is hard to pull off too, but let me see if I can put my thoughts into words. Even a simple competitive game can generate fun, laughs, challenge, because of the interactions between the players. And I find cooperative games, while it is of course still a shared experience, it's a little bit trickier to make a simple cooperative game fun. The loop of, here's the good things that happen that the player can do on their turn, here are the actions, and okay, and it's time for the bad things to happen, right? And that core has to be interesting and has to have some variety to it to make you want to play the game again and again. Because any simple cooperative game can be fun the first time you play, but is it one that you want to come back to, or are you going to feel like it's the same experience? So I'm going to try to explore that in this video. I'm going to start with the older game, Horrified, and then we'll talk about Alien, Fate of the Nostromo. Horrified came out, according to the copyright notice, around 2019. See, I haven't done any prep work. I don't have any notes, so I had to check the back of the box. Designed by Prospero Hall. Now, Prospero Hall was, at the time of this recording, so Prospero Hall is a nom de jeu, a name, an authorial name, representing a group of designers that work together under the name Prospero Hall, and they often work with licensed properties. And my understanding is not only do they do the design work, but they also do all the work on the production. And basically, it's just to the producer, to the publisher, Ravensburger, they basically deliver an almost finished product and said, do you want this? It's for 1 to 5 players. Completely fine to play this solo. You don't have to play multiple characters. It says it takes about 60 minutes, and it says ages 10 and up. 8 and ups are fine. Like a lot of Prospero Hall games, this is a licensed property. This one is about the Universal movie monsters. So what have we got? We got Dracula. We got Frankenstein's monster and Bride of Frankenstein. That counts as one monster together in this game. You got Wolfman. You got the Mummy. You got the creature from the Black Lagoon and the Invisible Man. Generally, you can play as any 2 monsters, or if you want to up the difficulty, every 3, you can pick any 3 monsters. And the way the system is designed is any monsters can work together. They don't interact with each other because, there's a positive part of the turn and there's a negative part of the turn where bad things happen. And the negative part of the turn, the monsters might move, or they might not, or they might both move, or one might move twice. There's a random element in that part where you have multiple monsters, but one of them at any point in time is frenzied, has a little fire marker on it. When you do your actions, you do your good things, and then it's time for the bad things to happen. You'll flip a card, maybe a civilian comes on the board, If you're able to save the civilian later by bringing them to the location they want to go to, you'll get a special ability card, one-time use. And if you fail, that's 1 point towards losing the game. Alien will have this as well. It has a track that starts high, and as you have encounters with the monsters, it's going to go down until it reaches 0, at which point you lose. When the monsters reach a space with a civilian, the civilian immediately disappears off the board. It's gone to a farm out in the countryside, and you'd move the marker. If it encounters a hero, then you'd roll dice. The dice may be blank. They might have a hit, and hits are handled quite simply. Your items are hit points. You will be collecting items over the, as part of your action, collecting items, religious symbols to fight Dracula. They're all very well generalized. So instead of specifically stakes, they'll have stakes, but they're the color yellow, representing sort of a religious as opposed to scientific, which is opposed to like physical, like a gun, which is red. But they're all just generalized into those 3 different colors. So you need yellow colors to defeat Dracula, for example. So you're picking up these items, and these items are your hit points. So if you encounter a monster and the monster rolls dice and you get hit marks, then you have to discard items. That's very simple. And you can choose not to discard the items and take the hit, at which point you don't lose. You're removed from the board, and it counts as a kill, I suppose, so the track moves, and then you just come back next turn at the hospital. But also the dice have an exclamation mark on some of the sides, and that will activate the villain's special power. But when you're drawing that sort of the negative event card, right, it almost always involve putting items out on the board, which you can collect. You'll need to defeat the monsters. It might introduce some civilians that you have to rescue. At the bottom of the card, it shows symbols representing the different monsters. And these are all the monsters that activate. So one card might show the Invisible Man and Bride of Frankenstein and Wolfman. And any of those that are in play will then activate. But it also might show a fire symbol, which means the frenzied monster, which is always one of the monsters that's currently in play, and certain event cards can move it around, that one can get an action as well. That's fun because it's not very predictable. I mean, you know which monster is frenzied, but based on the flip of the card, the monster might do nothing, or might make one move, or might make a double move. I mean, they mostly behave similarly in that they're chasing the heroes and or civilians and attacking them if they get into the same space. The cards, the negative cards, the bad things cards, bad events, will often also represent particular events that happen if a monster is in play. So an event will either have no monster associated or one monster associated. And if it's one monster, then it'll say what that monster does right now. It'll be something special. Like the Invisible Man, for example, might teleport because, you can't see him move there, to the location with the most items and then discards them all, destroys them. Besides those sorts of events, which are, of course, different from monster to monster, the exclamation mark actions that happen if the monster attacks but rolls an exclamation mark, it's a different thing for the different monsters, and they all have different ways of defeating the monsters. They're all relatively simple. The Horrified rulebook actually says, these are simple ones, these are medium ones, these are high complexity ones. If you're a hobbyist, high complexity one is nothing to worry about, honestly. This is a easy to learn game. But for example, the Invisible Man, you need to bring evidence to the precinct that the Invisible Man has committed these crimes, and it's items from particular locations that you drop off at the precinct. Dracula, you need to destroy the 4 coffins, which are on the corners of the board, with red items, which are like physical attack items, and then you can attack Dracula proper, discarding a certain number of yellow items. And the items all have like numbers on them indicating their strength. So it's like, you need yellow items totaling 8 or more. And so you have to have that much. Different ways to defeating the monsters, but they're all based on a very simple structure because the whole structure itself is simple. Simple items. They're red, blue, or yellow, have a number representing their strength and a location where they come out on the board. But it's a very simple game, but it does offer drama. because you don't really know, which monsters are going to activate on which turns, and it provides variety because there's 6 different monsters, and you can have 2 or 3, or I suppose you could do 4 if you were crazy. And while the monsters don't interact directly with each other, the fact that they operate differently means different combinations feel different. I really like Horrified. It is very simple. It's a game that doesn't feel on the rails. That there's enough variety in how the monster operates and the variety between different monsters and their combinations that bring the necessary variety that create an experience that is not going to be exactly the same every time you play, which is the danger with some of these simple cooperative games, that they can play out kind of in a rote way, that the second time you play will be pretty much identical to the first. And that's not the case here. It's by default pretty easy. You can play with a single person, a single hero, works completely fine, although it's super easy in that case. You have to adjust the starting position of the marker on the track, just before you lose. You have to adjust that if it's just a one-player game, because the game is pretty easy, but it also is able to scale pretty well as well. And there's a fair amount of cooperation. The goals are all public. You have the civilians who have to be saved. You have, we have to defeat the Wolfman somehow, right? Who's the one that's going to be, responsible for keeping, the 2 Frankensteins away from each other? And so there's going to be talking out about that, but I don't know there's necessarily a whole lot of cooperation that happens. It's just more the divvying of tasks. But with the perk cards, which are the one-time special use cards, every player starts with one, and you get one whenever you save a civilian. And you can play those out of turn. So anytime on someone else's turn, you can play it too. So there is the room to discuss and go like, well, if you plan to do this, then I can help you with that with this card or something. Most simple cooperative games are like that. There's not a huge amount of working together on a single task, but it's more like there's multiple problems. How do we divide up the tasks? I enjoy Horrified. I enjoy the variety that comes in the box. The presentation is simple but very, very pleasant. It's something that I can teach to pretty much anyone. And if you're into the movie monsters, of course, that's a kind of a fun thing too. I enjoy it. And the game, even though it says 60 minutes on the box, it feels fast because the turns can be very fast. Overall, I love the presentation. It's simple but effective. You don't expect anything fancy. This is retail, and it doesn't need anything fancy. It's got the plastic minis for the monsters. That's all it really needs to really make the presentation pop. But they do a good job with the presentation in terms of the color scheme. It's kind of dark, but still very clear, right? Like the locations of the town are kind of like bright street lit yellow, but everything outside those spaces is dark and the paths are very clear. So the presentation is really well done for the game. I'm generally very, very impressed with Prospero Hall. I think that they have done a great job with a great many games. If you're interested in a light cooperative game, Horrified is a great one. This is more complicated than Forbidden Island, but the complexity is just in the personality of the monsters. That's really it. And that's what helps make the game shine. Here we have Alien, Fate of the Nostromo. I actually don't have the designer's name. It's not printed on the box anywhere. But it's also published by Ravensburger. And this is branded Ravensburger, so they're more responsible for the production, I think, than for Horrified. But same stats. So it's for 1 to 5 players, ages 10 and up. And this one says it takes 45 to 60 minutes to play. My brother, one of my brothers, loved the Alien franchise. Aliens was his favorite film of all time, and he could quote the entire movie by heart. I wish I could play this with him. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. But I wish this game existed, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. He would have gotten a huge kick out of this game. So the board shows a layout of the ship, the Nostromo. There's one monster, of course, which is the alien. And then it comes with plastic figures for all the 5 heroes, which are 5 characters from the Alien film, including, Ripley and Ripley, excuse me. Oh my god, my brother will haunt me now. And those are plastic figures. There's also standees for, the track, basically the scare track, and morale track, they call it. So when the track reaches 0, the game is lost because everybody has lost morale, right? And there's also a standee for Ash, the science officer. Spoiler alert, he's a bad guy. But they didn't give a plastic figure for him, just a standee. Because I guess he's optional. Like if you play the base game, you don't even use him. This game will give you, at the beginning, a bunch of objectives. There aren't a huge number of objectives, maybe a dozen or so. Deal out a bunch of those, one more than the number of players. And there's also like a final objective, which is secret. There's maybe half dozen of those. And you don't get to see what it is until you complete all the other objectives and you flip it over. But all the objectives are, the regular objectives are all mostly the same concept, which is usually bring a certain item into a certain location. The board fills with scrap. just scrap is just raining down in the middle of this ship. Every turn, generally more scrap appears somewhere on the board, and players can collect the scrap and then use it to build items. So they might build a flashlight, which means that if the monster comes in the same space as them and they would normally lose morale, they will lose less morale because they're less scared, I guess. Weapons, which don't kill the monster, but it can drive it away. And there's even that has some very nice touches too, because you can also build a cat carrier for Jonesy, the ship's cat. There are also coolant canisters, which are, you don't create them. They just start on the ship generally, but each character can only carry one. And some of the objectives are like, bring 2 coolant canisters to this room or something. The board is very claustrophobic, and the alien generally moves between 0 and 3 spaces, depending on the flip of the card. It's like a typical cooperative game, is that players will have their heroic actions, their list of actions that they can do, which involve pick up all the scrap in a space, build an item, trade with another player, this sort of thing. And then there's the negative part of the turn, right, where bad things happen. Again, it's the flip of a card. And there's basically 3 different types of cards. There's alien, there's quiet, and then there's an order, a number like 937. It's an Ash related card. The quiet ones are only one time through the deck. The alien moves a tiny bit. Unlike what you might picture from a game based on the Alien movie, you always know where the alien is at all times. But there's a catch. It can pop up somewhere you didn't expect and basically jump to your location. But generally speaking, the negative cards, if they're quiet, it's just the monster just moves a little bit, maybe some scrap appears somewhere. But those never get shuffled back in. The alien cards, the alien moves further. So the alien always moves toward the closest crew member, and the board is extremely claustrophobic. You're never very, very far from the alien, which does increase the tension, but also can be a bit frustrating. A run of bad luck and the morale just plummets. But there's an alien card in the deck that when it comes up and you do the thing, you take all the alien cards that have already been played and shuffle them back in. And the Order 937 cards, whatever they're called, the Ash-related ones, Ash is an optional add-on in order to make the game more challenging. So basically there's 2 difficulty settings. I mean, and you can adjust it as well, because that morale track, you can start wherever you want on it, right? So you can make it more challenging that way. But generally speaking, there's 2 difficulty settings, and easy and hard. So the easy one is just the alien, and the hard one is alien and Ash. Ash is cardboard standee that moves around the board, destroying scrap, so keeps people from creating items. But the cards, the Order 937 cards, whatever they're called, they're basically random events. Some of them are just like, the current character goes to medbay. So it's not necessarily connected to Ash, but some of them are. They make Ash move or whatever. Those cards, depending on like when a certain order card comes up, again, that card goes back in and all the order cards come back in. So the quiet cards never go back in. So the deck becomes more difficult over time. The alien moves farther. The negative events connected to Ash, the order cards, become more frequent. So the challenge does ramp up over the course of the game, which is a negative part of Horrified that I didn't mention. It doesn't really have an arc. You're just kind of doing the same thing over the course of the whole game. This game does have an arc in that the game does progress toward a more challenging end of the game. Alien is a challenging game, or can be, when you use Ash. It's pretty easy without Ash, or can be. My experience is the first time I played this game, I got my ass kicked, but then the second game was super easy once I realized what I was doing wrong. And then the third game I brought in Ash and it became hard again. The thing is, because the game is so claustrophobic, and there's a very clear rule for the alien that it always moves toward the nearest crew member, anybody who wants to do anything will be chased by the alien. And you have to arrange it so that one of the characters in the game is able to draw the monster's attention away from where you want to go. Right? So I want to go to the workshop. The workshop is right next to the nest. Even wherever the alien is, it doesn't take very many turns to get to the workshop. How do I get there? Well, based on where the alien is now, I can move this character over here, and then the alien will come towards them and then free another character up to go to the workshop. And that works fine. Not necessarily fun when you're on draw the alien duty, you know. Hey, alien, come here. There is one element of the game that throws a monkey wrench in that. There are concealed tokens. So some rooms start with one of these, and then more get added from the negative cards to certain rooms. One card just says, like, add a concealed token to every room that doesn't have somebody in it. Concealed tokens are double-sided, and one side will show nothing or an alien. One has Jonesy. I'll come back to Jonesy. So whenever you enter a room, you have to flip over the concealed token there if there is one. And if it's empty, nothing happens. But if it's an alien, the alien immediately jumps to that location and you lose morale. Whenever one of these tokens is revealed, you do the actions on it, and then you take that token, you add it back to the pile, face down, and mix it up, which is a little bit annoying because there aren't that many of the tokens. So sometimes there'll be like one left, and then you go into a room, you get a token, okay, you reveal it, do the thing, put it back into the pile of now 2, and then mix them up. Well, it's kind of hard to mix up just 2 tokens without remembering which is which. It would be great if you could like draw them from a bag or something, but you can't really because the tokens are double-sided and you don't want to accidentally see the wrong side when you have to put one on the board. It's something that it's just a tiny little annoyance that gets in the way of playing the game, is dealing with the concealed tokens. But it's some nice thematic elements because one of the concealed tokens is Jonesy. So normally it's either nothing, empty, or it's an alien. And if it's an alien, that's the negative thing that happens that turn. The alien jumps to the location, and then the person has to run away. But there's also Jonesy. One of the tokens is Jonesy. So you reveal the token and it's Jonesy. It's a jump scare, right? It's like, oh, you thought it was an alien, but no, it was a cat. And you still lose 1 morale. And then Jonesy runs off, back to the concealed token and gets mixed up. You can actually build a cat carrier with scrap tokens and carry around a cat carrier so that if you reveal Jonesy and you have the cat carrier, you can actually remove him from the game, basically. So he will no longer, decrease your morale whenever he jump scares you, which I think is an amazing element that they've added to the game. In general, in terms of the presentation and the elements they chose to include, with Ash, and the slight variety in the final objectives, this is a great game for anybody who's a fan of the film. Like especially like a big fan of the film. Like they would adore this game. They would love the little elements that are included in it. It just doesn't have quite as much variety as I would like for a simple cooperative game. Especially when I compare it to Horrified, which is the obvious comparison. This one came later, but it's also from Ravensburger, same box size, same concept. It's licensed horror property, cooperative game, same numbers even, same player count, same age range, more or less same time frame suggestion. They even both have the element where the side of the board that when it's folded, you have in the box, and you open up the box and you reveal something that you can see just printed on the board. It's kind of a nice little element. I like the concept of Alien. I love the presentation. I love the elements. I feel like it was really made with fans of the film in mind. From a gamer's point of view, I don't feel like it offers quite enough variety. I have played this numerous times, and the only real difference I felt from game to game was whether Ash was in the game or not. And that makes a big difference to add to the challenge. The game is generally too easy without Ash once you know how the monster moves. Every game kind of plays out similarly. And this is a danger of many, many cooperative games. Even the granddaddy of the modern cooperative game, Lord of the Rings, is like that. It can be a little samey the more you play it. Some games are able to avoid that quite well. Horrified is an example of one that does. Alien, unfortunately, does not. So it's really, really great to introduce to people who are fans of the film. And I have to say, from like a mechanism point of view, the game absolutely works, no question. And it'll be fun the first game or two you play. It's just going to feel really, really samey the more you play. So it's the final objectives and the regular objectives too just aren't different enough from each other. I do like that, unlike Horrified, there is a ramp up in the challenge. Like, as the game continues on, the game gets harder and harder, as opposed to Horrified, which is pretty much always the same difficulty level from the beginning to the end. It's just, there are some games that just don't feel like, and there's enough variability from game to game, that you just feel like you're just kind of going through the motions every time you play. The game can be challenging, especially with Ash, but like, if I can only have one of these games, I would, even though I like the Alien film a lot, and I don't really have much love for the Universal movie monsters, from a game point of view, I like Horrified a lot more. It's really enjoyable, and every time you play, you know, you have a different combination of monsters and just makes it fun. And Alien is a good game that is just good for like a once in a while play, I suppose. Like, you're not going to binge on Alien. I played this game a couple of times. I don't want to play it again. Not that it's bad, but just like, I have seen everything there is to see in this game. And there's some cooperative games that even after I reach that point, I still enjoy them. I still enjoy going through the process. And Alien doesn't feel like it has enough in the core to bring me back once I have seen everything the box has to offer. I hope that makes sense. Like I said, I didn't really prepare this video much in advance. I don't have like a bunch of notes. I just wanted to share my opinions on these two games that I've played recently. I've played both of them a few times, and I haven't, even though they're kind of similar on paper, I do like one more than the other. I'm going to put Alien in the restaurant. It's going in the restaurant where it will excel. People will love the fact that there's an Alien board game, and in the restaurant, customers won't be playing the same games every single time. So that's sort of the ideal environment for this game, is in like a board game cafe, where you can try it and you can have that fun experience. Next time you go to the cafe, maybe you'll play it again, who knows? Or maybe you'll play something else, but there'll be a new group of people to discover Alien for the first time. Horrified is a game that I'll keep coming back to. Thanks for watching. Even though neither of these games are old, in general, older games don't stop being good because newer games come out. Right, take care. Okay.